Okay, I think we can start it. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. It would be a really big honor and pleasure for all of us and me as well that we have you here for this perfect presentation. And here we have the really best professors. Really, come on, I know it's it would be our pleasure for sure. In the University of Georgia, the floor is yours. We are all ears.
Okay, great. So you're going to say my name and who I am?
Sujata
Iyengar, University of Georgia.
Yes, I'm so
United
sorry.
States. Yeah, great.
Yes, also I share your resume and your article with the guys in
Oh, good.
Instagram,
So you
and
may already know a lot of what I'm going to say if you read the article.
exactly.
I'll just cover it quickly. It's the same thing, really, pretty much that I've got here.
Perfect.
So as you know, Shakespeare's Henry V concludes with a treaty between England and France, enabled through the marriage of King Henry and Princess Catherine, the compromises of France and Burgundy, Queen Isabella's advocacy, and even Henry's own willingness to let his delegates speak on his behalf. Although the final scene dramatizes the historical Treaty of Troyes, the play's epilogue implies that the principles of what the philosopher Nia Isikowitz has called, in its theory of truces, truce and welcome respite from war, even if this settlement turns out to be a truce rather than a peace. Next slide, please. Okay. All right. And because this is a PDF, normally I would animate but I get everything at once, so that's fine. Isikowitz identifies as truce thinking the frame of mind in which one can work towards what we all want, peace for all time, by beginning with peace in our time, rather than imagining a truce, an armistice, or a ceasefire as a stop, an appeasement, a mitigation, or what Israeli philosopher Avishai Margalit called famously rotten compromises. Synthesizing analyses of famous ceasefires and reconciliation processes, such as the Christmas Day ceasefire in World War I, or the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in post-apartheid South Africa, with the political philosophies of Camus, Hume, Kennan, and others, Isikowitz isolates 5 core principles of truce thinking. The first 3 are moral or ethical, and the second 2 are pragmatic or tactical. So the 3 moral qualities are the belief that circumstances may change in the future and peace may ultimately be possible, that is to say, optimism. The second is a belief that modest arrangements or agreements can alleviate living conditions for those involved in chronic conflicts and improve mutual attitudes. That is humility, accepting even a small amount of progress as a step on the path. And then tolerance, the ability to tolerate compromise. The 4th and 5th qualities are pragmatic. Tactics, understanding that waging war in the name of abstract principles may make wars longer and bloodier than they have to be. And then finally, he suggests truce thinking believes that truces can offer fighters a chance to rest before they start fighting again. That is to say, efficiency, which is, again, a subspecies of tactics, I suppose. And the risks that you've got here are rotten compromise with a truce, where you have an agreement that tolerates a regime of inhumanity or cruelty. In this sense, Henry V's treatment of truce recalls the pattern identified by Timothy Hampton in the Henry VI plays, in which drama most effectively expresses diplomacy, and in particular the actions of truce, because of its relationship to time. So time truth is the daughter of time. It's a famous proverb from the period, right? That time is going to uncover what the truth or the potential for peace. Analyzing early modern political theorists such as Hugo Grotius, Hampton suggests that truce offers a liminal space of conflicting temporalities, an imagined war and not war, an uneasy present and future peace that contains the threat of past and future war. This is why it's a truce and not a peace, the idea. And in he further argues the truce provides space out of time for the profound dissection of character in both the terms we use it, the casual sense meaning a person, a human being, a character, and as a moral attribute denoting heroism, somebody who has character. Truces fall apart, Hampton suggests, when each side must lay bare its fundamental differences of opinion on what constitutes character, and on who or what possesses it and who is fit to wield power. Peace thinking, that peace for all time as opposed to peace in our time, can emerge from truce thinking only when both parties agree on who is enough of a hero to lead. Henry V, Shakespeare's Henry V, juxtaposes Iyengar's 5 principles of truce thinking alongside these qualities of early modern appeasement or soft diplomacy, a play ostensibly, even in Henry V, which is a play ostensibly or even chauvinistically about war and a famously ambiguous hero. It's hard especially to reconcile with peacemaking or the idea of a so-called just or righteous war, given Henry's injunction that every soldier kill his prisoners, which, when you're watching it for a theatrical audience, comes without provocation. It's only in the scene after that order, everyone kill his prisoners, through Fluellen, that we learn that the French have killed the boys and the luggage, a law expressly against the law of arms. Scholars have variously suggested that this inconsistency derives from haste in composition, from textual corruption, or that justifying this murder retroactively highlights the problems Henry faces in claiming that he is waging a just war. Whether we believe the play bolsters that case, diminishes it, or hedges uneasily between the two. Next slide, please. I'm less interested, however, in those insoluble questions surrounding intention than their effects on the audiences for the conflated text still used for most live productions and film adaptations. The 2 versions of the play are usually put together for whatever we perform or make into a film, the folio and the quarto. British and US governments have wielded this play, Henry V, as a weapon of war through the 20th and 21st centuries, from the Second World War to the Falklands conflict to the so-called War on Terror, and there are scholars who have explored this at greater length. I suggest the theatrical construction of Henry V, where we're unsure who has broken the rule of honor first and whether Henry's response is justified, encourages the audience to question the value of war for abstract principles and to question the possibility of a perfect peace process. Moreover, the play's final scenes critique the so-called just war and praise even the value of the temporary peace enabled by the treaty and truce in both the high and low style through political drama, romance, and farce. The comic scenes with Fluellen and Pistol, such as their mock truce, debunk high-minded, abstract justifications for war because they present as their ongoing ethnic conflict Pistol's mockery of Fluellen's Welsh leek. The treaty or truce between Pistol and Fluellen concludes when Fluellen insists that if Pistol can mock a leek, he can eat a leek, cudgels him, pays him a groat, and then bids him a gracious "God be with you" in farewell. In contrast, Act 5, Scene 2 teaches audiences the value of the truce thinking brought by the kings of Burgundy and France. Peace that, quote, nurses the arts, plenties, and joyful births, and those are conditions 2 and 4 of truce thinking. An imagined peaceful future where all griefs and quarrels shall change into love, and that's Queen Isabella meeting condition 1, optimism. A distance from stubborn ideology, where Henry's mere request shall make the king let it pass, and both the King of France and Henry are making demands that the other one agrees to. That's condition 3, tolerance. And an eye to better positioning in future negotiations, as Henry fantasizes compounding a boy, half French, half English, that shall fight the Turk. So for Henry, it's condition 5. It's efficiency, tactics. The play suggests that the achievements of truce in Act 5 Scene 2 are worthwhile, even when, as the epilogue reminds us, such peace is a temporary truce rather than a permanent settlement, and even when they involve compromise and negotiation. At the same time, Henry V alerts us to the dangers that compromises will become rotten or corrupted, and suggests by truces motivated by those tactical considerations, oh, are we going to rest and then fight better, above moral ones, are we imagining a future permanent peace, are going to fail sooner rather than later. Next slide, please. So to get a little bit more into the principles of truce thinking, the optimism, humility, tolerance, tactics, and efficiency. Iyengar also distinguishes among different types of truce making and different levels of peacemaking. So an armistice is temporary and includes no provision for future peace building. The ceasefire is temporary, and this is very apt, right? It needs the consent of only one party. There's avoidance where for the partition of India or other colonial states, the Cold War, during the nuclear arms race, the principle of mutually assured destruction. And what he calls truce thinking aims low, he says. Where peace thinking looks ahead 2 or even 3 generations, truce thinking privileges the present moment and the immediate resolution of horrible human suffering. In this sense, it resembles the, quote, contingent negotiations that Timothy Hampton locates expertly on an early modern continuum between high-minded angelic visitation and the ruffianly ministrations of the pimp or the board, right? So on one hand, says Hampton, you might have the Annunciation, and on the other, you might have prostitution, right? So there's a kind of continuum between types of truce. Iyengar calls truce theory a, quote, non-transcendental theory of conflict reduction, as opposed, he says, to Kant's assertion that if you end a truce with unsolved problems, you don't have peace because there will be future conflict. Above all, truce thinking, unlike peace thinking, says Iyengar, believes that war is too irresistible to be eliminated. Next slide, please. So this is one of the ways, the idea that war is too irresistible to be eliminated, in which truce thinking resembles what Nathalie Rivère-Descartes calls an Elizabethan poetics of appeasement that uses truce, marginal agency, diplomatic coup d'etat is what she says. And what she means by this is soft power, particularly the power of women to negotiate, the use of entertainment and drama as a space for a temporal or spatial pause, the coup d'etat as both the intrusion of a marginal space and time into political or historical time, and a method of combining political and diplomatic peacemaking. And again, like Hampton, she singles out drama as one way to do this, as a perfect vehicle through which to investigate what is necessary for peace, because it allows the viewers to deploy what she calls double vision. Dramatic double vision allows ambassadors and monarchs to envision alternative realities and to fashion different versions of themselves and their countries. In these senses, the concluding truce in Henry V is imperfect, temporary, shifting, double, and a fundamental test of character in its moral senses. A famous essay by Norman Rabkin from 1977 compares the play's eponymous hero, Henry V, to a well-known optical illusion that looks like both a duck and a rabbit. King Henry is ambiguously a military hero and a warmonger. Many critics have noted the difficulties of presenting this play in a way that does not glorify war. Even Kenneth Branagh's storied attempt on film to present the barbarism of both the king and the marauding armies, using documentary-style film techniques and historical evidence to capture the dirt, stench, putrefaction, and loathsomeness of medieval warfare, and judicious editing to show viewers the execution of Bardolph and the heaped young corpses of murdered boys, found itself stymied by both the rhetoric and the mise-en-scène of the Crispin's Day speech. And we can extend this analogy to the concluding truce. If Henry is a righteous king fighting a war imagined to be just, he brings a triumphant peace. If he's a cruel tyrant, he offers a truce, a short break in an ongoing aggression. Next slide, please. As part of its ambivalence, Branagh's film included the king's order to kill the French prisoners, although it did not present those execution on screen. And the inconsistencies surrounding the slaughter of the French prisoners have received extensive editorial and critical attention, and it's a little bit tedious to go through them. But let me go. But you know, we have to review them a little bit. The problem is threefold. So why does he give the order, "Let every soldier kill his prisoner," without any justification, the way we see it when we're watching it, when prisoners of war were a valuable commodity, especially if they were nobly born? They were usually ransomed and sent back. Why does he then give the same order later on? He says, "Cut all the throats of all we have." He's already said, "Kill all the prisoners." So how are we going to kill them again? Or are there more prisoners in the meantime? Have they captured more people? Or did some of the soldiers refuse to kill their prisoners? Third, if he's killed all the prisoners twice, then how come in Act 4, Scene 8, he has so many prisoners of good sort for ransom? So was it a threat? Or was it, as he later claims, that the French have killed the boys and the luggage, the servants, against the law of arms? Next slide, please. John Sutherland returns to the justification for Henry's order following Holinshed's chronicles, explaining that the French horsemen had attempted to plunder the unguarded rear of base camp and killed the English servants. Certain Frenchmen on horseback, to the number of 600 horsemen, the first that fled, either upon a covetous meaning to gain by the spoil, either because they wanted to make money off it, or upon a desire to be revenged because they wanted vengeance, entered upon the king's camp, and there spoiled the hales, robbed the tents, break up chests, and carried away baskets, and slew such servants as they found to make any resistance. And then, according to Holinshed, Henry demanded every man upon pain of death should incontinently, that is to say, immediately, slay his prisoner. Sutherland says this scene with Fluellen, where we have this explanation about the French killing all the boys, looks like ex post facto, that is to say, justifying it after the fact, or special pleading. There's no dramatic way within the story of the play for Henry to have known before he gave the order. And therefore, Henry must have been motivated by, Sutherland says, military prudence, not condign reprisal. As for how many prisoners were killed and which prisoners were killed, Sutherland offers three solutions. First, he says Shakespeare just didn't care and assumed the audience wouldn't care. Second, maybe only a few prisoners are killed because of expediency and time. It takes time to kill people. Third, only the ordinary prisoners are killed, while the nobles are left alive to be ransomed. Next slide, please. If we look at the anonymous play, The Famous Victories of Henry V, we find some support for the view that the nobles are spared. So here's scene 16 from this 1598 play. I don't have the quote yet, but I will. In scene 16, the Earl of Oxford claims all the nobility of France are taken prisoners, although he also claims that some princes and nobles bearing banners have been slain too. The Famous Victory also includes a comic rendition, shocking to me, shockingly comic and callous interlude with John Cobbler and Robin Pewterer. A cobbler, as you know, is a shoemaker. A pewterer is a tinsmith. So these are common men. And this is how they feel about the king having killed all his prisoners. Enter John Cobbler and Robin Pewterer. Now, John Cobbler, didst thou see how the king didst behave himself? But Robin, did you see what a policy the king had? To see how the Frenchmen were killed with the stakes of the trees. Aye, John, there was a brave policy. Famous Victories also includes this retroactive announcement of the French attack on the English camp, as well as an origin for the dialogue between Pistol and Lefebvre, that's an unnamed French soldier, and the wooing scene between Henry and Catherine. In contrast to both the quarto Henry V and the Famous Victories, the folio Henry V subtly casts doubt on the justness of Henry's war, and that's Janet Clare I quoted just then. Gary Taylor's Oxford edition, single volume Oxford edition, calls for an even more cold-blooded Henry. Gary Taylor suggests that there are two groups of prisoners. The first group is captured. There's a French attack where they kill the boys and the servants. The prisoners taken during the attack are slain. The English beat back the French again, capture more prisoners, and then Henry plans to cut the throats of those prisoners. Taylor says directors should have the prisoners killed in full view of the audience in a show of bloodshed that even Kenneth Branagh's so-called gritty Henry V abjures, although it includes the order to kill the prisoners, clearly justified in the film, though not in the play, by the murder of the boys. I have not been able to find many examples at all of stagings or film adaptations that show Henry himself killing the prisoners. A notable exception being Kevin Kline as Henry in 1984 at the Delacorte Theatre in New York. In that production, one review says Henry personally slit the first French throat at hand. Next slide, please. Charles Edelman astutely notes that there are two accounts in Holinshed in 1587, the second edition of Holinshed, and that these accounts conflict. Holinshed both has the Englishmen attack their noble prisoners, following Hall's chronicle, and then following another account, has the king merely threatened death to the prisoners. And so the first account, when the outcry of the lackeys and the boys, which ran away for fear of the Frenchmen, came to the king's ears, he, doubting lest his enemies should gather together again and begin a new field, and mistrusting further that the prisoners would be an aid to his enemies, or the very enemies to their takers if they suffered to live, contrary to his accustomed gentleness, commanded that every man upon pain of death should incontinently slay his prisoner. And there's a marginal note that says all the prisoners slain in the side. The conflicting account says that he merely threatened, promising herewith that if they did offer to fight again, not only those prisoners which his people already had taken, but also so many of them in this new conflict should fall into his hands, should die the death without redemption. And the marginal note says, a right wise and valiant challenge of the king. So in the second account of the murder of the prisoners, he doesn't do it. He threatens it if the Frenchmen try to attack again. In Hall's chronicle, it's the English soldiers, not Henry, who slaughter their prisoners, regardless of rank, because they're worried that the Frenchmen will fight them and kill their captors. Few prisoners or none were saved, says Edmund Hall. In Titus Livius, the other chronicle, many, but not all prisoners were killed, and when the French capitulate, the remaining prisoners, who are mostly noblemen, are ransomed. Charles Edelman goes back still further to the source of Edmund Hall himself, to the French account by the historian Lefebvre's History of Charles VI. Lefebvre tells a story of Henry's soldiers refusing to carry out the cruel and senseless orders to kill the prisoners, and claims that Henry had to appoint a special archer to execute these prisoners. It makes most sense, says Edelman, to follow recent historians and argue that, quote, even if the real Henry V had ordered the killing of the prisoners, and even if the order had been obeyed, not many prisoners, and certainly not the majority, would have suffered that unhappy fate. And Edelman argues, like Norman Rabkin, that there are two versions of Henry, but unlike Rabkin, he says that we have to choose between the duck and the rabbit. Each version of Henry, righteous king or warmonger, is incompatible with the other. And which Henry you pick will depend upon, quote, the uses to which particular readers are putting the text. Holinshed, the chronicler on whom Shakespeare most relied, I would argue, picks a bloodthirsty and venal Henry. The marginal glosses, as I've said, note all the prisoners slain and characterize the execution as a lamentable slaughter, a dolorous decree, and pitiful proclamation. And I'm going to read an addendum to you that I didn't put on a slide because it's sort of gory. Pity it was to see how some Frenchmen were suddenly sticked with daggers. Some were brained with poleaxes. Some slain with mauls, that is mullets. Others had their throats cut, and some their bellies panched. So that in effect, having respect to the great number, few prisoners were saved. In contrast, the second account, the one that talks about it being a right, wise, and valiant challenge because it made the French leave the field, and it makes the English sound a retreat that they then classified as a happy victory. And I'm quoting this to show there's no confusion in my mind about Henry's ferocity in Holinshed. As Diana Henderson has noted, however, even the grisliest productions or films, even those that focus upon Henry's sorrow at the slaughter he occasions, merely, quote, update Henry as the very model of a modern military leader engaged in wars against his will. Henderson suggests that a concentration in performance upon the monetary motive for Henry's actions in this play, including not only the possible ransoming of the prisoners, but also his ignoble bargaining, that's her phrase, for Catherine's hand, could allow us to see beyond the coming-of-age story often mapped onto Henry's development and to escape a deterministic notion of history. And I think that including the justification for the slaughter, that the French have killed the boys and the luggage after the fact, could maximize audience members' sense of shock, so that we do not feel that this mass execution was politically necessary to broker a peace, and instead see how corporatized warfare becomes a perpetual motion machine of slaughter. Next slide, please. Maintaining the senselessness and venality of the massacre could ready us for the truce thinking that emerges in the final scenes of the play. Isabella imagines a future utopia in which English may as French, French English embrace one another, and that's the radical optimism of Condition 1. Burgundy pleads in favor of the naked, poor, and mangled peace, dear nurse of arts, plenties, and joyful birth, identifying conditions 2 and 4 of truce thinking. Number 2 is modest or humble achievements. This will be a naked and a poor and a mangled peace. And 4 is the practical good that peace will afford the country. The King of France and Henry call for toleration. Notably, the Queen accompanies the Lords, lest articles be too nicely urged upon. And France responds in response to a request to disinherit his own son, he says, your request shall make me let it pass. That's a big ask, but she gets him to agree to it. Elizabeth Pentland suggests that French women in both King John and Henry V are, quote, meant to avert further bloodshed and secure a lasting peace between two warring nations, even, as we've said, at the cost of Isabella's disinheriting her own son. Both Henry and the King of France agree to let their agents compromise behind the scenes. The only item to which the king does not subscribe, the naming of Henry his heir, he makes Henry request in public, to which Henry agrees. And I'll read you this. The King of France, nor this I have not, brother, so denied, but your request shall make me let it pass. King Henry, I pray you then, in love and dear alliance, let that one article rank with the rest, and thereupon give me your daughter. The only cautionary note is sounded by Henry, who anticipates future negotiations or even conflict, and wishes to shore up his position with the marriage. Prepare we for our marriage, on which day my lord of Burgundy will take your oath and all the peers for surety of our leagues. Then shall I swear to Kate, and you to me, and may our oaths well kept and prosperous be. The hint of danger in may our oaths well kept and prosperous be, and the deferral of the oaths of fealty until the marriage oaths are sworn, suggests Henry's caution and his eye to his long-term position. It suggests that this peace is skeptical, a truce rather than a peace, a suggestion carried through in the final chorus, the epilogue. Henry VI, in infant bands crowned King of France and England, did this king succeed, whose state so many had the managing that they lost France and made his England bleed, which oft our stage has shown. And for their sake, in your fair minds, let this acceptance take. And that praise for their sake seemingly refers back as an advertisement to the early Henry VI plays. But the downbeat ending still seems like an odd way to conclude, in that it reminds us of past theatrical successes that retell England's future political failures, and asks us to accept a peace in the foreknowledge of future war. It suggests that the condition on which we accept Henry and England's victories is only as a temporary truce, not a permanent peace, but that a truce, even if temporary, enables for a time the flourishing of happiness. Small time, but most greatly lived, that is to say, humility. Icikowicz identifies this state of temporary truce as the modus vivendi, an alternative to political thinker John Rawls's theory of liberalism. Where the latter focuses upon rights, suggests Icikowicz, the former finds this a dead end that gives too much power to the judiciary. Modus vivendi forces us instead, argues Icikowicz, to come up with, quote, flexible, context-dependent solutions to impasses. Such solutions would prove particularly welcome during our current highly polarized political impasse in the United States or in our currently war-torn world. Partisan political polarization is at an all-time high, with politically engaged Americans and the so-called bystanders among the general public further apart than ever on issues such as public assistance for the needy, racial justice, immigration, and perhaps most alarmingly on the value of diplomacy or soft power over military might. Democrats have been waging a war in the courts, usually one based on the Rawlsian discourse of rights, but so-called men's rights and white pride or neo-Nazi groups have in turn co-opted this language of rights, the language of classic liberalism and of the Enlightenment, to justify white supremacy and sexism, and have in their turn begun to stack the judicial branch of the US government with partisan conservative judges. Even public health concerns have been politicized. Free speech and academic freedom are under attack within the US itself. With over 55,000 Gazans dead as a result of Israeli attacks and 1,200 murdered by Hamas, the term genocide has itself been politicized. Faculty in the US have lost their jobs for suggesting that regardless of its intentions, Israel is perpetuating a de facto genocide of Palestinians through its actions. At such a time, isn't any truce or modus vivendi a rotten compromise, in Margolit's term, requiring us to, quote, torture, humiliate, or dehumanize other persons, leading us to consequences that ultimately prolong war and disease and that destroy more lives? In contrast, Karl von Clausewitz argued that any compromise was worth taking rather than prolonging war, because, he suggests, most people are naturally peaceable, and I'm going to read the quote now, a number of sparks are always extinguished which would have smoldered on quietly, and the excitement of the passions abates, because all those whose minds are disposed to peace, of which in all nations and under all circumstances there is always a great number, turn themselves away completely from the road to resistance. Whatever may take place subsequently, we must always look upon the object as attained and the business of war as ended by a peace. It's hard to approve of citizens, turning themselves away completely from resistance to any authoritarian or dehumanizing regime, or one that, say, engages in genocide, as in the Second World War and many wars since, as a good thing. But the philosopher René Grothendieck suggests that peacemaking must function as a preliminary step in what he delineates as a necessary process of nation building, which again, he says, must happen before state building. Just like peace building, which he distinguishes from peacemaking, building nations and states must come after making, which, constantly evolving, he says, requires sustained, open-ended, that's his word, commitment and dialogue. So how does Icikowicz respond to this charge of the, rotten compromise? Icikowicz suggests, as I've said, if you think only of tactics and efficiency, those last two considerations, the practical reasons for truce rather than the moral and ethical aspects, can indeed lead to rotten compromises. But the first three qualities of truce thinking, optimism, tolerance, and humility, can help us seek out instead those with whom we can develop a modus vivendi, those who can share an optimism for the future and a belief in the healing power of time, modesty or humility in our goals, and tolerance or at least avoidance of ideological disagreements. Elizabeth Pentland points out Catherine's and Isabella's truce-making, although seemingly doomed, bore long-term fruit. After the death of Henry V, Catherine married Owen Tudor, and her grandson ousted Richard III to become Henry VII and to launch the Tudor dynasty. Quote, her great-great-granddaughter was Elizabeth I, Shakespeare's queen. Henry VI in his infant bands at the end of Henry V thus reminds us not only of the failure of his father's peace, activated as it was by tactical concerns, just as his war was founded upon the legal language of the Salic law, the Rawlsian discourse of rights, rather than the modus vivendi, but also of the cycle of hope and the potential for peace ushered in by each new generation. And my final slides are slides for discussion. I don't have scripted comments. I have a slide on ancient and medieval rules of war, the rules of war as understood now, and what the Geneva Convention actually says about war crimes, if those are topics you'd like to discuss. So we could move on to the next slide, and if you like, and I'll talk you through what I've got. I mean, sorry, the next one after this is just some references. Yeah, so this is possible discussion topics. What were some ancient medieval rules and practices in war? What are the rules of war? What are the terms of the Geneva Convention? So we can advance. Yeah, so this is what I've put. So some of these will be familiar to you. I mean, we encounter these in ancient world literature and in history too. The Mahabharata, the Iliad. If we look at what they did in the Mongol campaign, what the Vikings did, you suspend battle after sunset. You spare the lives of women, children, and those who are unarmed. You ensure safe passage for ambassadors, diplomats, and messages. You observe a truce or a ceasefire. There was a tradition of chivalric admiration of the enemy, certainly in the ancient world and the medieval world, all the legends surrounding the friendship between Saladin and Richard the Lionheart, which you may be familiar with. It was practice. I've got practices as well down there that are not so admirable. It was the practice to enslave lower class prisoners and to ransom high-ranking male prisoners, and to wield rape as a weapon of war, to marry high-ranking female prisoners or release them both in succession, and to enslave lower-class women and men. The rules of war today is the next slide, as understood by Ton Tannenbaum. This was for an interview right after the war between Hamas and Israel broke out on October 7th. And so the rules are the question of whether or not a country is engaging in a genocide, as understood by political scientists and lawyers in the US now, is that you're supposed to adhere to certain rules now. Distinction, that is to say, to target military objectives and not civilians or civilian objects. Discrimination, which means you can take a discrete military target. You cannot target an area in which there are military objectives, but also civilian populations and civilian objects. So to me, at least, it seems as though if, for example, you are claiming that human civilians are shielding or being used to shield fighters, the principle of discrimination would seem to indicate that you would not attack those civilians, even if there are military objectives to target them, or military campaigners there. Proportionality. So civilian loss of life, injury or damage to civilian objects that will be expected from the attack should not be excessive in relation to the military advantage that the commander authorizing the attack anticipates for that attack. And this is perhaps the one that we see most clearly violated in recent conflicts, where there's a great disparity between one nation state and another group, where the number of civilian dead, or the number of deaths and the number of injured and wounded is far more even than the number of persons imprisoned or victimized, murdered, subjected to atrocities, right? Atrocities there are enough atrocities to choose from. So proportionality will be the next one. And then my next slide is, I was interested. So this was just, I was talking to my students about this. They wanted to know after October 7th, what comprised a war crime. And I was like, well, let's look at Henry V and you can judge. Is Henry V performing war crimes? Let's look at the Geneva Convention. And so they wanted to know in particular what to do when you have an armed conflict not of an international character occurring in the territory of one of the high contracting parties. So what happens when you have a sort of civil war or war on a small piece of land that is claimed by two countries, right? And so these are prohibited: violence to life and person, mutilation, cruel treatment, torture, taking of hostages, outrages upon personal dignity, the violation of due process, that is to say, execution and passing of sentences without previous judgment from a court. You're supposed to care for the wounded and sick, and you're supposed to include an impartial humanitarian body, such as the International Committee of the Red Cross, to allow groups such as this to witness and to help to serve people in the conflict. And agreeing to any of these shall not affect the legal status of the parties to the conflict. So that's what the Geneva Convention, which often cited by the press, has to say about conflicts. So it seemed clear to my students here that Henry was indeed engaging in war crimes. And that he would have been doing so even if the French had killed the boys and the luggage, even if the French had committed this invasion, this atrocity, this kidnapping first. So, and now I'm ready for you. I'm ready for you guys to pick up, go back to any slides you want to, or discuss.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful and marvelous, to be honest. When I just read your article also, it was really perfect. A good connection that maybe I didn't think about it in this aspect. And thank you so much. Guys, if you have any other question, you can open your mic.
Do I have something in the chat here? Let me have a look. Oh, no, just...
No, yes.
Yeah, you can drop them in the chat if you're having problems with your mic or whatever. Tell me about your day.
I don't have any. Hi.
Hi.
I didn't have any questions, but I just wanted to say thank you. It is an honor to witness an actual great professor from one of the greatest universities in the world, and it is a very interesting point of view. Usually, our presentation, not by the professors, but from the students, are not this thorough and complete. And it was really enjoyable to watch this presentation. Thank you so much for this.
You're so welcome. It was quite dense, you know, so I'm glad you had the chance to have the article, because it's a lot of historical stuff as well that I'm putting together. But I felt like I had to give you guys something that might be timely, you know, and I love Isikovitz's book, and I'm not a pacifist. I mean, I used to say I wasn't a pacifist, but I'm feeling more and more like a pacifist right now, with so many wars breaking out all over the place. And I wanted to come back to this article because I was thinking it's your generation, right, that that are inheriting this messed up world. And but youth, the quality of that is optimism, you know, and this is what you're doing is such an optimistic thing to be doing. To gather every week, right, and listen to talks about literature. So.
Yes, exactly. Also, the situation of the really Asian and Middle East nowadays, maybe it's messed up, and exactly this is the right time to go back to this article, comparison to the Henry V. It's really amazing.
So where are you all coming from today? Have you had a long day, all of you? What have you been doing?
Yes, let's have a quick talk.
Well, me personally, I spent the entire day at parties and mostly looking forward to this session. because it is really great to pick up some great minds like this. And the comparison, you are absolutely right. When we read the old literature, we realize the similarities that they have to this world and how it's been so long ago, yet we are still doing the same thing. We are following the same pattern, and not only we don't learn, we actually find a way to make it worse. So we read something and we're like, oh, okay, so I can do better, or I can do worse. So I'm gonna go with doing worse. And unfortunately, it's good to actually have a picture of how the past was and how we are still continuing to follow the roads of the past.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, Icicovit's quote, my heart sank when I first read that. War is too irresistible to be eliminated. You know, I really resisted it at first because that's not what I want to believe. And yet, Nicholas Kristof in the New York Times, the columnist, had been writing all these articles about how peaceful the world was in the second half of the 20th century. And then the 21st century has been characterized by nothing but conflict, it seems like, and conflict's getting bigger. What can we do in situations like this? Yeah.
Unfortunately, the fact is that we don't remember peace, and we don't remember grow, and we mostly remember war. So I think that the world thinks that it's necessary for it to have some sort of a war, a battle once in a while, so that it could be remembered, the history could continue. Because most of us, I don't really see people to pay attention about things like architecture or art or literature or stuff like that in history, but everybody's like, oh, did you hear about this war or that war? I mean, everybody know about World War I and World War II, but no one really knows about the other things that happened back then, other stuff that actually started to grow at that time. So I think that war is necessary for literature, for history to continue. I don't think that. The world thinks that. I love peace.
Yeah.
I don't think that.
Yeah, right. Rather than thinking about literary history, it's a nice change to think about literary history. Or can we have a political history that doesn't involve war? What would a political history look like that wasn't a history of war or battles? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Any other comments, ideas, questions?
I see a question down here from where can you find the article? So the article is available. I can go look for it, but you have the link, don't you, Zahra?
Yes, also I share it to the channel because after I tried to answering her, I think she didn't check, because we have a Telegram channel. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because of that, I sharing the links with them. Also.
Great. Yeah, no, I saw you said that, but I didn't know what you meant by the channel.
Oh, yeah. I try to share with them the links of the poster, the articles, PowerPoint also if you want it.
I didn't know Telegram could do all that, but I guess it's like Signal, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, also. Thank you so much. It would be really perfect, our pleasure and really amazing experience to have you here in our Litchclub. To be honest, near 40 people that they are here. It was really fantastic. Also, Mahbouba just mentioning your presentation was really interesting. I read your article from war crimes to thinking Shakespeare, Henry V, and found it very insightful. Thinking demanding three moral qualities: optimistic, humility, and the tolerance. Iren, good to see you all. Please do share the slides with us. We would appreciate it. Okay. And M says, thank you so much for giving us such thought-provoking presentation.
Thank you. I'm glad you found it useful. And yeah, optimism, humility, and tolerance, they're not bad ways to kind of get through the day.
Yes, exactly. Mehregan, do you have something to add or no?
Are we good?
Fateme, Leila, Kosar, thank you so much. We hope to have you maybe another time again here. It would be our pleasure.
Absolutely.
Yes, and for sure, give me the connection with friends.
Yeah,
of
Professor
yours.
Jennifer Lowe, definitely. She wants to talk to you about. She's a Shakespearean as well.
Amazing.
So yeah. So I will. She has to be put in touch. I really like these icons. They're so much fun. I'm just yeah.
Yes, as I mentioning to you, in Iran, we have a really enthusiastic students that they really love with literature. But as you know, sometimes the situation, sometimes because of the a little weak educational system, that most of our professors immigrants, so migrate, and because of that, maybe sometimes we need these such a things to be online, open-minded for all the people who can came and shared the ideas, and it would be a really wonderful and marvelous experience, I think so.
Yeah, there's a book here that was a bestseller called Reading Lolita in Tehran, which was about a reading group that an American, I think it was an American academic ran. You know, so I had an idea that there was this culture of literature and of reading in Iran. You know, that which is wonderful. Yeah.
I hope to be host you in Iran one day. Who knows?
Oh yes, that's right. Optimism, humility, definitely. So take care, all of you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much
you
for
so
being
much.
here.
And maybe I'll see you later, and I'll put you in touch with Jennifer, Professor.
For sure, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.